Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. Media Day has come and gone. That means I think the NBA season has officially started. Training camp has begun. The preseason is in just a few days, and we've got roughly a billion storylines to break down coming out of Media Day. Keith, my head is still spinning from all the different media days around the NBA, and I love it. Basketball is back.
Yeah, it's awesome. Media Day this year was a little weird, and we're gonna get
Yes.
into some of that. It was very definitely a different tone than what we're used to. But I popped around a whole bunch of different ones. I clearly was on Celtics Media Day all day on Monday. Lakers had theirs today. I popped in
Mhm.
and out of that a couple times, and then I was jumping around the other ones because the thing with Media Day is I don't know how many people realize there's like big pauses sometimes in
Yeah.
between. Some of the teams they're pretty machine like, and it's player, 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 and in they go. But sometimes it's if they get held up doing like a radio or something for the
Mhm.
team site, you get held up. So there was an opportunity to pop around and uh, all the team reporters, which I have Twitter lists for, and all those things on my tweet deck. They were rifling off. It was a little hard to even keep up
Yep.
sometimes with everything that was being said, but the most important thing is training camps are open, man. We're here. I normally would say we got through the long off season. Well, let's say off season. It wasn't necessarily long this
It's
year,
it
but
still
we're
felt
here.
long.
Basketball's back. Yeah. And today was great because, for the Celtics, for example, they had their first training camp. So we got a little snippet of things they worked on and things they're doing. And that means, basketball's
Nice.
back. And that makes me a happy guy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lakers media day today. They had well, they always do this every year where they've got the players over on one station when they're like taking their promo photos and stuff like that. For one of them, they have the players yell. Right? Like that's just it's what they want them to do.
Yep.
But so when you're
Yep.
in the middle of the media day interviews, every once in a while you hear just this loud, just guttural scream in the background, and
Yep.
it's just one of the players doing their thing. So it's always kind of a little bit
Love
jarring.
it.
But no, I mean it's great that we are back in action. And actually, right as media day started commencing, it was yesterday. Some of you might be watching this Wednesday, which that's fine. We're kind of summing everything up at the conclusion of all these media days. But on the first day of media day, some of the news that came out: Michael Porter Jr. and the Denver Nuggets. Woo, what a deal!
Talk about happy
172.
guys.
Yeah, 5 years,
Yeah.
172 million for Michael Porter Jr. I know it was reported as 207 million, but that's kind of
Yep.
the way that goes. He's got to reach some incentives, got to make all NBA in order to get that 207 million. But still, Keith, there were a lot of people around the NBA that reacted very negatively when this happened. I'm
Sure.
talking about mostly fans who said, "What are the Denver Nuggets doing? This is crazy. Why did they give him that much money?" And I know you explained on Twitter why this might not be as bad of a deal as it looks like on the surface.
Yeah, I don't think people fully grasp how good Michael Porter Jr. was, especially last season, and how well he really scored and shot. And it's funny because I did have one guy say, I I don't fully understand what's the difference between being a scorer and a shooter. And I said, DeMar DeRozan's a scorer, Kyle Korver's a shooter. Like
Yeah.
that's I think a very easy way to explain it, and hopefully that helps if anybody is wondering that. But in Porter Jr.'s case, he's both. He averaged 19 points per game last season as the Nuggets' third option. So that's already pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But then let's go to his shooting splits: 54% from the field, 44.5% from three on 6 attempts per game. And then he was at 79% from the line. That's only 2.2 attempts per game. So you'd like to see that nudge up a little bit.
Mhm.
But he also averaged 7.3 rebounds and sneaky, almost a block per game, too, for Porter Jr. So and he really started to play with some better effort. He also knows perfectly how to play with Nikola Jokic. He's understands where to cut, when to be places, when to stay, and all those things. And it's just 19 points per game on 54, 45, 80. Like that's
That's ridiculous.
ridiculous.
That those
And
numbers sound like
eh,
they're not even sustainable, right? That's how high they are.
yeah, yeah, in at his size, the lift he gets on his jump shot, you can't even bother it.
No.
There's nothing you can do. And I know people are like, well, yeah, but are those, like you kind of said, are those numbers sustainable? Well, last year, 51%, 42%, 83%. So I think it got a little bit forgotten. This guy was in the mix to be the number one pick in his draft class. And there were a lot of people who thought he might be. And
Hmm.
he was absolutely a dominant offensive player on the high school level, and then didn't really play in college. And this is why the Nuggets, I think, feel comfortable. We're locking into this big money. We're going to get into that here in a minute because they've paid a lot of money to a
Yeah.
lot of guys now. But it's because this guy, I think they see him as an absolutely dominant offensive weapon and somebody who really fits well within their kind of hierarchy with Jokic, with Murray, and with Aaron Gordon. So I don't I thought he might get a touch less. Now, Ryan McDonough, former Suns GM, now
Hmm.
does media work. He reported that the final year is not fully guaranteed, and that's something that's going to be interesting to see. What does he have to do to hit those, get that to be guaranteed? And you mentioned he does have that designated player language, which could push him into the that middle tier, that 30% max tier. But he's got to make All NBA this season. He's got to do that. That's probably not overly likely, I
No.
would guess, but I don't know. I'm not going to say it's definitely not likely for a guy who has certainly proven too that he's over the injury issues and he's fully healthy and ready to go.
Well, here's the thing, Keith. A minute ago, you said, now if there was some more effort, like, think about that. Like, he put up 19 points on those crazy shooting percentages. Now imagine if he tried. Right? Like, that's,
Yeah,
and I know we're talking about the other things, the non-shooting, the defensive end of the
yeah,
floor,
yeah,
right? He gets
yeah,
criticism on in other parts of his game for sure. But I mean, this is a guy where we talk about you want to pay a player for what they're going to do, not necessarily for what they
yeah,
have done. When you pay a player for what they have done, that's where sometimes you can get yourself into trouble, especially with an older player.
yeah,
Obviously, that's not the case with Michael Porter Jr., but in the case of Michael Porter Jr., what they're doing is they're paying him as though he is going to continue to grow and continue to develop, and they're giving him a vote of confidence. And it's a
yeah,
lot of money, but it's the Denver Nuggets. They weren't a major free agent destination. They've got a really good team.
nope,
They've got the reigning MVP, and they're locking into it. So I don't blame them. Look, if they wind up winning a championship out of this, nobody's going to care what they were giving Michael Porter Jr.
nope,
because it will be worth it. And again, they're waiting on Jamal Murray to
yep.
come back still too. They're going to have a really good team for years to come now.
Yeah, so what they're gonna have is Porter Jr., even if he doesn't hit the escalators to bump up to that 30%, right now his max salary projects at 29.7 million for next season. Now that's when the extension would kick in. So that year alone, they're gonna have Nikola Jokic at 33.6, Jamal Murray at 31.6, uh uh Porter Jr. at 29.7. And then they just came in today. I tweeted about them. You can find that on my Twitter account. Aaron Gordon's numbers, his salary, his extension starts at 19.7. So that's a lot of money locked into four players,
Yeah.
essentially four players between 20 and $33 million is where they're at. But it is that's it. You said it. They're not a free agent destination. They're not pulling in a ton of major guys. It's just, hey, we feel good about these guys. We feel good about these four guys playing together
Hmm.
too, which is really important. It's just a good fit. So yeah, I don't have any issue with this. And it really is, if they hit finals, make the finals, or win the finals, it's really all worth it because that's uncharted territory for this team.
Right.
They've never been there. They're not, and it's easy for you and I, two franchises who are tied with 17 titles apiece, to kind of poo poo if you don't win a championship. It doesn't matter. But look at the Suns fans, how much it meant to them to make
Oh
that
yeah.
run last year.
Right.
Look at the Bucks clearly won, but even just to make that run, how special that was. So those are the things. That's where the Nuggets are trying to get to. And then if you're there, you're there. You're in the mix. You may win the championship. One last thing I want to say about this one too is super cool. His dad told a story to one of the Denver media people. I apologize, I can't remember who it was, but his dad told the story of 2 years ago. He was sitting in a hospital bed after back surgery, wondering if he'd even be able to play again. And that to me is pretty cool stuff. That 2 years ago, this kid didn't even know if he'd play, and now here he is, where he is. He's now a max NBA player, and the sky's the limit for him as at least an offensive player, an offensive weapon. So, really cool. I think
Right.
this is great.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic considering how far he's come from that moment. So great news for him. Another big story going around media day had to do with, unfortunately, COVID and everything going on with that. We already
Yeah, look at
have.
you. We start with a nice story. Now you're
I
gonna
I
bring the whole
I
room
know
down.
we gotta drop it down a little bit, just a bit here,
But
right?
yeah.
But it's unfortunately it's
Let
the world that we live in right now.
Yep. And let's say, guys, we're covering this mostly from a basketball and
Yes,
availability to play basketball standpoint. We're not going to preach at you one way or the other. We have our feelings on it, but that's not what you're here for. We fully understand. With that, I think it's probably fairly easy. I can at least speak for myself. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably know how I feel about these things. But the reality is, as we get into these individual players and situations, some of these guys, whether they're in these cases are not vaccinated or may not get vaccinated, it's going to have an impact on their ability to be with their team for a full season. So that's something we have to cover. So if you don't like it, we fully get it. We understand if you're tired of it. I know a lot of people were tired of it. I think Trevor and I were probably tired of
absolutely.
that conversation by the end of the day, throughout media day. But here we are. So we're gonna get through this and talk about these guys.
So we've got Devin Booker who's going to miss the start of Suns training camp due to health and safety protocols, but again, that's just the start. Should be around for the
Yep.
rest of it. Uh, Andrew Wiggins, oh boy, here we go. Andrew Wiggins won't play in the Warriors' 41 home games and won't get vaccinated. And it sounds like he's going to be giving up about $8.9 million to make a stand here and refuse to get vaccinated. So that's a big deal for the Warriors. I mean, look,
Yeah.
if you are the Golden State Warriors and you're trying to hang on until Klay Thompson comes back, right? Whether it's December, whether it's January, whenever it is that Klay Thompson comes back, Andrew Wiggins, until that point that you have a healthy Klay Thompson, is your best wing defender, and you're not going to have him for any of your home games.
Yep.
That's a big deal to the point where I did a radio spot earlier today. The topic was brought up. Do teams that are in this situation maybe look to trade these players, like an Andrew Wiggins, if you feel like, hey, we really need to hang on here until Klay gets back to have a shot? Does it make you a little bit more aggressive in trade scenarios? Now, again, maybe it's a bit of a long shot, but it could be a factor here if you know this guy can't play in half of our games.
Yeah. Now, Wiggins is difficult to trade
Yes, yeah. I'm
because
not
he's
saying like you could just
wildly
trade him
overpaid. But
easily. No.
yes, it is a fair question. I've been asked the exact same question on podcast
Yep.
appearances as I've owned. I do commit podultery occasionally here on poor Trevor. He's the good guy here, but
Ah,
on
man.
various radio spots and the like. But it is yeah, it's something people wonder, and you have to wonder if you're the Warriors. Because so let's take this circumstance out of it.
Yeah.
If you just went into the season knowing one of my better players, and even if you don't care for Andrew Wiggins as a basketball player,
Yeah.
he's still not awful.
No.
He's better, and he's been better in Golden State, I think, which we all thought, right? When he's the third, fourth, fifth best guy on a team, he's looks okay.
People think he's worse than he
But
is because of his contract. Let's be
exactly,
real.
yeah,
That's what it is.
yes, yeah, that's it. He's wildly overpaid, but so is a good, what, quarter of the league.
Yeah.
But anyway, even if you can get past the other stuff, if you started the year saying he's not going to play in half your games, you'd be like, boy, all right, let's look at what are we going to do.
Right.
And that's just the reality of it. That's where we're at right now. Now, I will credit where credit is due. Andrew Wiggins said, when asked, that's an awful lot of money. His answer was, that's my problem, not yours.
Yeah.
So hey, if his belief is this strong, we say it all the time with stuff, put your money where your mouth is. Well, he is. So we'll see what happens. Um, just to clear up one quick thing,
Yeah.
because the Warriors reported today that he practiced and went through the full practice, and a couple people asked me on Twitter, and then on a radio appearance was like, I thought he couldn't do that. The San Francisco ordinances, mandates, whatever you want to call them, they don't start until I believe it's October 12th or 13th.
Oh.
So he's got a couple weeks till that's gonna kick in and be the rule. So that's where it's at now. The other thing I will say too is, now this is, we talked not going to be there basketball wise. Stephen Curry, who has to be looking at this to some extent and saying, hey, I'm, trying to get back to the playoffs. I'm trying to win another championship. I don't know how many great years I have left. And he played at an MVP level last year. He was asked, is it acceptable that Andrew Wiggins is not going to be there? And he had a long pause and answered, acceptable? That's a strong word. And then he said, it's not ideal. And then kind of launched into, which we heard a million times from a million different guys yesterday. It's a personal decision.
Yeah.
We have to respect people and all the things that were said with that. So, but clearly he's not okay with this. He's not, now whether he's directing that towards Andrew Wiggins, where probably should be directed towards, or towards the city of San Francisco or the Warriors or the NBA or whoever it is, it's there. I will also say, I was told by somebody who said, even if the NBA gave him the exemption that he applied for and was declined for, he did not get the religious exemption. Right. It would not have allowed him to play because the city still says you can't be in the building. It's not the NBA's rule here. He would have been exempt from the NBA stuff, which Shams Charania has been tweeting about it tonight, and the restrictive nature of the players that aren't vaccinated and what they can and can't do and all those things. But he still would not have been able to play in Warriors home games unvaccinated because it's not the NBA's call in any way, shape, or form, from my understanding. So this is a story that's not going to go away for a little while for a team that everybody expects to be pretty good.
So, and one other thing that I want to clarify. The giving back that money, that's not the Warriors are fining Andrew Wiggins.
No.
Right? That's what it's he's not allowed to work in that city. That's what it is. It's not the Warriors are mad at Andrew Wiggins and fining him, and that's not what's happening here as far as him giving up that money.
And some folks have asked too, and this will cover every single guy in the same boat is, well, and I've seen people they say with Klay Thompson, just because he's been out for 2 seasons now, is, well, why didn't they go get money back from Klay Thompson? It's a completely different situation.
Right.
Klay Thompson was injured. This is Andrew Wiggins has made a personal choice that will keep him from the ability to do his job in the city of San Francisco where they play and practice. So that's what it is. It is that's the difference right there is, he's just not doing his thing. So he doesn't get that full amount with that. Very different from Ben Simmons, who we're going to talk about later. Very different situation there. It's just, this is he is not injured. If he was injured and somebody said, well, why doesn't he just say he hurt his back or something like that? Well, because the doctors would check him out and they would say his back is fine. And then you'd run into a whole bunch of other stuff. So just to, kind of make sure we're all a little bit on the same page with the understandings of how this works. It doesn't create cap space. There's no exception. Nope. There's no tax savings. None of that for the Warriors. That's just money he actually does not get. Nothing changes on the Warriors cap side at all.
And the same situation going on a similar situation going on with Kyrie Irving with the Brooklyn Nets. We'll have to see how that plays out. Kyrie, of course, being as mysterious as always, and that's probably about as much as I want to say about that.
Yeah, I will say there's been reporting today that it sounds like some people have sources that have told them they believe he will get vaccinated, and it's going to be at the pressure of Kevin Durant saying, basically, my guess is let's not let this mess up a chance at a championship.
Right. Yep.
Now, I don't want to even have the discussion. Is that more important than your personal beliefs? Because that's not. It's whatever you believe, you're going to believe. We're not changing any minds there. But my guess is that's good. That's how the conversation is going with Durant and Harden of, hey, let's not mess up a chance at a title here.
Bradley Beal also said he is not vaccinated for personal reasons. Maybe that changes, but the NBA is right now finalizing those protocols to figure out how a vaccinated individual is going to be treated versus person who is not vaccinated. Obviously, the person who is vaccinated is going to be much less restricted. There's going to be daily testing. I've even seen stuff saying that basically you can't even really be together if you have a player who is vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Can't go to dinner together. It's going to change.
Restricted to the hotel or to home. They can't go out. Their lockers must be distant from other players and all that stuff.
It's like going back into the bubble, basically, if you are unvaccinated.
Kind of, and Bradley Beal,
like a mobile bubble.
Again, update today, he did come on and say, I didn't say I never will. He said, I've decided to not to right now. So So we'll see
Uh,
where it goes.
and then Jonathan Isaac said that vaccinated players are being vilified and bullied.
Yep.
And that was the
I
way that he sees that. And I know we have talked about him injury wise as well as Markel Fultz,
Yep.
but that was something that he put out there that he feels like players who are not vaccinated are being targeted in that way. And again, it's 90%, 90+% of the NBA is vaccinated. So we're not talking
Yep.
about the majority here that is dealing with this situation, but the fact that it's some high profile names, I think that's turning this into an even bigger story.
Well, the reality is, if it was Joe Camp player,
Yeah,
no one
right.
cares, right? Because it's you're on the roster for the next few weeks and then you're out of here. So I don't really care if you're vaccinated or not. For the general public, I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. But also, Joe Camp player, guy fighting for a roster spot. I can tell you, I've had multiple conversations with players, with agents, and teams where it was, yeah, it's absolutely a factor. And yeah, are you going to be available to play? Think about it. If you're a guy trying to fight your way onto the Nets or the Warriors roster, the last thing you probably can get away with is saying, but I'm not going to be able to play half the
Oh yeah,
games.
no.
Like, you're going to move on and go get a different player just because it's, and you could say fair, unfair, scream up and down. Well, playing in the NBA is a privilege. It's not a right. It's not something everybody gets to do because otherwise, suit me up. I'll be out there. It's not how this works. So they have the right to pick and make their roster how they want to. And if they're looking at it and saying you're not available for half the games, no, we're not going to have that. So, all right, we done with vaccine
Let's
talk.
go from one sunny topic to another. Let's talk injuries,
Yeah,
Keith. Let's go. Let's
injuries.
get into
Yay.
injuries. Jonathan
Yeah.
Isaac, Markel Fultz, not available to
Yep.
start the season.
Yep.
That's I mean those are two key pieces for the Orlando Magic. But again, getting those guys fully healthy is the most important thing there, especially on an Orlando team that's not expected to be a playoff team or anything like that.
No. Yeah, they're going to be terrible
Yes.
with those guys or without them. But the reality is, you'd rather have them than
Hmm.
not. I think in Fultz's case, he talked about how reminder, they're both coming back from knee injuries. Fultz said as he's worked his way back, he has been able to rework his jump shot a little bit, but in a good, positive way this time. He said that he has reworked his release point, and from little snippets that I know people have seen, it looks a lot more like the way he shot the ball in college,
Yeah,
that's a good
that's
thing.
good. Yeah.
That's, just get back to that and we'll be good. And Markel Fultz, go look if you haven't, because it was only briefly last year, but in the end of the year before, he had turned himself into a pretty productive player. At the bare minimum, this guy is a starting level point guard in the NBA. If for no other reason, he's a really good defensive player. He can get after it defensively. He's very long. He's pretty quick.
Mhm.
He's pretty tough. But he's not going to be ready to go right out of the gate. Same with Jonathan Isaac. Outside of other frustrations with Isaac that some of the Orlando fans are having, they're frustrated with the fact that this is a year and a half later and he's still not back from this. But as you said, they're not going to rush him. There's no reason to rush him back or anything like that. Fultz, that one's a little easier. The Magic have a ton of guards. Bigs, they've got a handful of centers on the roster, but true forwards like Isaac, that's where they're a little weak. And they're a little weaker because Chumo Kiki is out
Mhm.
too. He has a hip bruise that was suffered in off-season workouts. So again, this isn't anything most NBA fans are going to overly care about because this team's going to be bad, and a lot of that's going to be bad by design. But you're trying to figure out what you have. How do these guys fit together? How do they look? So you'd rather have them there than not.
Zion Williamson had surgery to repair a
Yeah.
fracture in his foot. That is never what you want to hear. Like big men and foot injuries, that's not a
Nope.
good combination. But to repair a fracture in his foot, but will be ready to start the season. And also added in that he doesn't want to be anywhere else regarding the New Orleans Pelicans. I know there were a lot of
Yeah.
rumors about him maybe wanting to go to the New York Knicks or someplace else. Right now, he kind of squashes all that, saying he wants to be a New Orleans Pelican, says he loves the city. But again, coming back from a fractured foot, that is not a great start to things for the Pelicans. I wonder what kind of shape he's going to be in to start the season.
Yeah, let's start with a couple things here. One, we should not be finding out on media day that he broke his foot in the beginning of the summer.
Right.
That's ridiculous. There was absolutely nothing to be gained from them withholding that information. That's just not being responsible partners to everyone in the league. Especially to this is going to come up more and more and more as the NBA continues to tie itself in with direct
Mm-hmm.
ties to
Yes,
gambling
sir.
and things like that. These injury reports become more and more important, and it's just these the teams have to be transparent. They're already pretty good with this stuff, but it goes back to even like the Clippers with
Kawhi.
Kawhi
Yeah.
last year. Like, oh, we don't know if he'll be back. We don't know if he'll be back. Oh, yeah, now that we're out, he has a torn ACL or partially torn ACL. It's like, he wasn't coming back. What game are you playing? But I'll get off my soapbox on that. So
And no, I
he's going to
fully
be
agree.
back.
Without jumping up on my soapbox,
Yeah.
I fully agree with everything you just said. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't. It's insane that we're finding out when we found out. And I can tell you too, this caught literally everybody I know, even people who know that team inside and out, had no sense that this had happened, and it got completely blown off the radar by all the vaccine related
Yeah.
stories because it was like talked for briefly in a moment and then it was like there. And it's funny too because even some people I've heard be like, well, he's going to be ready for the start of the season, who cares?
Right.
And it's like, because this guy weighs close to 300 pounds and
That
he's
was
a
my
big
thought.
man who jumps and lands hard regularly. Like it's a little
Yeah.
scary. It's one of those things where I just worry about big guys and foot and leg injuries. It just, never really seems to go well. It's maybe as a kid, Kevin McHale breaking his foot and then he was never the same after playing through it. Like that's always, kind of stuck with me. Foot injuries wrecked Bill Walton's career too,
True.
back in the day. And that's, now people are like those guys are old and they played when shorts were, 3 inches, above your knee or whatever. So stop, move on now. But yeah, the good news out of this story is, like you said, he says he doesn't want to go anywhere. He wants to be in New Orleans. So that's today, or what, 2 days ago, I guess that was,
Yeah.
Monday, the 27th or whatever it was of September 2021. Let's see when that comes time to sign that extension, how Zion Williamson feels at that point in time.
Indeed, indeed. You mentioned Kawhi Leonard, so let's jump to that. Kawhi could be
Yeah.
back this year, but I mean nothing new, right? Like we know that it's kind of up in the
Yep.
air whether or not he'll actually play this season or not. Torn ACL usually is about a year or so to recover. That would suggest no, but it was only a partial tear. Nobody really knows for sure whether or not Kawhi is going to play, and we've talked about it before. It may depend on where the Clippers are at that point in the season, how
Yep.
they're looking in the standings, whether or not they decide to push it and have him come back. But Keith, you and I were talking before we came on the air here. This had something to do with the contract extension that he signed.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. He was extremely candid. Kawhi doesn't talk a lot. He talked a
What?
good amount and was very candid at media day. And one of the things he said was this was a factor in why he didn't sign a 1+1
Mm-hmm.
contract. He didn't want to be in a position where he felt he had to get back to prove, like, I'm back. He didn't want to do this, didn't want to do that. And he very much said it factored in him signing the long-term deal and locking in that money because now he doesn't necessarily feel like I
Doesn't have to
have to
worry.
get back, or if I come back, I'm not risking
Yes.
everything if I come back to help the team. So I thought that was very interesting with that. And then he never directly said it, but he kind of mentioned, which we've talked about in the past. Yeah, he made sure he matched that contract up with Paul George, that they're gonna expire at the same time and all that. So that's just another thing to kind of keep in mind with this one.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know what, it makes sense. For as much as we see
Yeah,
stars doing 1+1 and they want flexibility and all that kind of stuff, when you're Kawhi and you're recovering from an injury in that very moment,
lock
you're
in
gonna
that
you're
money.
gonna lock in the money because we've seen too many times where
Yep.
guys don't and it goes horribly wrong for them. So I think he made the right
Get the
decision there.
bag, as the kids say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, this is a discussion we had the other day. It's becoming more and more now that we're seeing so many guys extend their contracts. It's about getting the money now,
Yep.
and if it comes to it, figure out the destination later.
Figure it out later.
Yep.
Yep.
Unfortunate. Karis LeVert, stress fracture in his back. I mean, all of these
Yeah.
injuries are unfortunate, but just Karis LeVert, given what he's gone through, it sucks just to hear him now dealing with a stress fracture in his back too, on top of everything else that he went
Yep.
through last season.
Yeah, and this is looking like another year where or when are we going to see this fully realized Pacers team? TJ Warren still out. He's out indefinitely. Doesn't sound like there's any real sense when he'll be back. Still dealing with that foot injury that he had. Edmund Sumner, another promising wing there in Indiana. He's out for the year after a torn Achilles. And now Karis LeVert. Now, the initial reporting was optimistic that maybe he's back for the start of the season. But this is a Pacers team that looked pretty good, but now you've really sapped some of that wing depth with LeVert out, Sumner out. Warren is he's kind of just a pure forward. He can play either forward spot. So that makes Torrey Craig's signing that much bigger. They still have Justin Holiday. Chris Duarte is going to have to play a big role right out of the gate. Probably was going to some extent anyway. We'll see. Does this kind of open the door for Jeremy Lamb, who to get kind of back in the rotation, just because you could have somebody to fill minutes out there on the wing.
And the story from the summer was that if he does prove that he's back, Jeremy Lamb, there might be some teams that will want to trade for him, and he might want out. So we'll keep an eye on that one certainly. Another move that took place, or at least jumping into a transaction here, Austin Reeves got the Lakers' final roster spot, 14th roster spot. Technically, they have a 15th. Not going to use it until the buyout market, but went from being undrafted just a few months ago, barely even a few months ago, to now having a full roster spot on the Lakers. Now, the contract, Keith, you had the details on this, so I won't spill it on that, but he's not a lock to finish the season on the Lakers.
No, only 100,000 guaranteed on his minimum deal in that this season. So that's very easily moved on from there if the Lakers need not the savings, because that they're already past that point, but if they need the roster spot, and then next year is fully non-guaranteed. It had been initially reported as a team option. We've explained why team options and non-guarantees aren't exactly the same, but kind of functionally most consider them to be. But so that's where it's at with Austin Reeves. So good for him for locking in some guaranteed money, more than he would have got on a two-way contract. So I'm happy for him that way. My guess is what probably happens here is, if for some reason the Lakers need that rush ball, which they still have another one open, so it's not like they need it immediately or anything, they could always bounce him back to a two-way contract if that's the direction they wanted to go, and then they'd still have him. But that's not the big news with Austin Reeves. Come on.
The big news is his nickname.
Hillbilly Kobe.
Hillbilly Kobe,
man.
HBK, baby.
Killed me. I loved it. I thought that was amazing. I was dying. You were the first one I saw to tweet it, so full credit to you. I don't think you asked him.
No, I didn't.
But I know it had been kind of floating out there, but he confirmed it. He said people do call him Hillbilly Kobe. So, I mean, I guess, man.
He said he's from Arkansas. Something. He grew up on a farm and everything, and so it just kind of fits. And he got the nickname Hillbilly Kobe, or otherwise known as HBK. I have to run it past my buddy Chris, the Masterpiece Masters, though, and ask him: is it okay that we really call him HBK, or is that reserved for Shawn Michaels, the showstopper, the main eventer? I gotta find out for sure from Chris on that one.
No,
but
that's HBK is already taken.
That's right.
And I haven't. That's about when I stopped watching wrestling. Was when Shawn Michaels was done. So I'm going old school and saying Shawn Michaels owns that one.
All right, we'll keep it with Hillbilly Kobe then for Austin Reeves.
I love it.
Last thing to finish up, Ben Simmons.
Hold on. Nope, you can't go yet.
What do we got? Oh no, the Simmons siren.
It's the Simmons siren.
It's back. Oh no. Oh, it sounds like Ben Simmons. Well, he's still a 76er for now, even if he isn't physically there. But according to recent reports, Ben Simmons has decided that he's done playing with Joel Embiid, that partnership could be a big part of the reason why he wants out. It's not so much that the 76ers said mean things or anything like that. It's more he doesn't like the situation with Embiid being the 1A, with Simmons as the 1B or the 2 or the Robin to the Batman or whatever you want to call it. He's not a fan of that arrangement and would like to go somewhere where he can be the top dog. As far as where that would be, I'm not sure, but that sounds like a big sticking point here for this situation, and he thinks that the partnership has run its course.
Yeah, and to be clear, from the reporting that was done, this was an Athletic piece. I want to say it was Bill Aram, Sam Amick, and Sean Sharania all contributing to it. It's nothing personal towards Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
He doesn't dislike Joel Embiid as a person or anything like that. Just feels like their games don't mesh well together. I've made
Mesh weather.
a portmanteau. Isn't that what they call it? Mesh weather.
Mesh weather. That's when the weather's like
efficient.
That's when the weather is like it's rainy, but there's also like a patch of sunshine somewhere else. You know what I mean? That's mesh weather, where it's just sort of coming together. You know?
See.
That's what it is. Now we're making up
They
stuff.
do not mesh well together. In Simmons' opinion, the numbers do not back that up. Those two guys sharing the floor was wildly effective last season.
Yeah.
I want to say there was something like plus 15.5 points per possession or per game when they were together. So, that's it just doesn't match up. That's I don't know that anybody necessarily is there with that, and it's funny because I've seen a lot of people coming out and saying everybody says put 4 shooters on the floor, and it just really comes down to if he's not going to be a willing shooter at all, I don't care who you put on the floor with him, it's gonna be kind of hard, but you got to get him in this primary creator, primary off ball role, and let somebody else move on. But yeah, it's that's the extent of the update. I will say from media day. Philly's not backing down either on this one. Philly, Daryl Morey said the CBA, without getting into the details, but said the collective bargaining agreement is very clear on what happens if he doesn't show up. But both sides here are dug in. They're not giving him away, and he's not coming. So, we'll cover it again if there's actual real news to cover. And there was, as we said, we're not going to give you a daily update. But when you hear the Simmons siren, we get something to talk.
Yep, something's going on. And for what we've heard so far, there's been some combination of young players and or picks involved, but the 76ers are more interested in win now pieces. And one of the challenges, and this is from Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, one of the challenges is that a lot of the players that they would want aren't tradable until the middle of December because they were signed over the offseason. So this might take a little while before they can actually get the pieces that they want in a trade. So who knows? We could have the Simmons siren ringing on Christmas Day. You never know at this point.
Little trivia for you. Kevin O'Connor and I went to the same college.
Wow, did you?
Yeah. Yep. Bridgewater State in Massachusetts. Two proud alums. We were both on the Bridgewater State Wikipedia page last I knew.
Oh.
So I'll take it.
There you go.
Yeah, makes my mom proud at least.
Nice. I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. I think that somehow wraps it up for the first half. By the way, we should have mentioned that at the top. Yeah. We still have a whole nother show to do to get through the rest of the media day stuff. This is only half of what we got. So we'll be back soon with the rest of this. Oh, Keith, I love media day, and I love that we're finally getting into training camp and all of that. This is a lot of fun, but I can't believe that it's going to take 2 shows to get through everything from media day because there was so much stuff.
Yeah, and this is, if you guys are like, you guys didn't really talk a lot of transactions because we did only talk a couple. Next show, it's coming. There's a lot of stuff to cover. What teams are bringing guys to camp, who might have chances, and we'll start breaking down some of those camp roster battles and those kind of things, and go from there. So yeah, a lot more coming for you in the next show, and we're excited, guys. We're really ramping up towards everything starting here. We're preseason games are only like a week away, which is
Sunday.
Crazy. So cannot wait.
Yep, here we go. All right, everybody. Appreciate you joining us. Make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. If you listen to the podcast version of this, make sure you follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to leave us a rating and review as well. And, of course, like this video. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.